Hello, my name is Elijah McCoy, and I will be doing my podcast on controlling images of black women and how these caricatures were used by a dominant white supremacist society to justify heinous acts within the black community, particularly to the black woman. This was done to justify racism, slavery, and discrimination. And one of the parallel themes that you'll notice between all of these polarizing caricatures is they were all their own fault. Instead of them being the victim of a white supremacist or an oppressive culture, they were the reason for the evils within their community. Instead of analyzing and empathizing with the individual and the communities that needed help, all fingers were turned towards them. They were the reason for their suffering. They were the reason that their children were deviants. They were the reason why they were uneducated, and they were the reason why they were poor and alone, at least in the eyes of white supremacists. So the first controlling image was that of the mammy. The mammy was a docile, submissive servant. She was essentially the ideal black woman in the mind of the white patriarchal male. She did not question her white male authority. She was agreeable, and she was essentially a second emotional mother for these middle class and elite white families. While she was pouring this energy for financial compensation in a capitalistic society for these white families, she could not support her black one. When I think of the nanny, I think of the movie The Help, or The Color Purple. These these characters could go either way. Now, first, some of them would transmute their oppressive perceptions of the admiration of the white man to their children for a sense of protection, and they would essentially play as a transmuter of this rhetoric to the family, and so essentially would assimilate her own family in the needs of the white man. But the other mammy did not. She initially or thoroughly held resentment for the white man. There was no admiration for the white man. She knew what she was doing. She did not enjoy what she was doing, but in a capitalistic society, to financially support her family, she had to adopt this role of treating and catering the white male. She taught her daughter the opposite. She taught her daughter to stand on her own 2 feet. She taught her daughter to be independent. She taught the women in her society to not tap dance for the white man and to create their own financial success. That brings us to our second caricature or controlling image that the white male used, which is the black matriarch. The black matriarch was the opposite of the mammy. She was not submissive. She was assertive. She was confident. She was perceived as masculine, as ungovernable in the eyes of the white patriarchal society. Not only did the white patriarchs use this caricature to control and manipulate his own woman by saying, look, woman, if you become independent, if you become self sustaining, if you become confident and assertive, you will be broken, you will be alone, and you will be miserable, and you will create deviant children just like the black woman. And this was a tool used to justify white patriarchal rule. These perceptions, the way that we see them in society today, are so powerful. And it's so crazy because this all translates hundreds, what, about 170 years ago. And in the black community, you still see these perceptions and these caricatures everywhere, whether it's in the media, whether it's TikTok. We even black people, even though these perceptions do not benefit us and harm us as a community, they're so hard to escape. I know people in my community who hold these same perceptions for their counterparts, for their wives, girlfriends, sisters, and mothers. So not only was the white male and the white woman against the other, or the quote unquote hyper masculinization of the black woman, but her own man believed that she was not lovable, that she was too busy trying to work. Well, the thing about it was, in this society, people are complex, people are human, people have emotions, people have empathy, and people still have egos. With these women taking care of the family, they were not hyper greedy or hyper masculine, strong, assertive women. Yes, they were assertive, and yes, they were passionate and powerful, but they were only what an oppressive society makes of the black woman. They had to become this way to survive. And instead of deserved admiration for being able to adapt to this particular type of society, all the fingers were pointed to her, and she was the reason why black communities were the way they were. She, the victim of the grander racist society, used the black matriarch as a scapegoat. Not only was she not feminine and cannot keep a man, but her children will become educational deviants because she's not home enough to cater to them. So instead of criticizing the culture that capitalism breeds, we targeted the independent capitalistic black woman, the matriarch. And here's the thing, at least under the eyes of patriarchal rule, any type of any inclination or rebellion of a woman, not even just a black one, is perceived as masculine, as unnatural, as hedonistic. The white patriarchal rule could not understand or even accept a woman who was independent. She went against what this society stood for. According to the Negro Family, a case for action, which was essentially like a assertion used to criticize the matriarch was aggressive. She emasculated the man and drove them from home. She didn't care for her children. From the white supremacist perspective, she was the failed mammy. How dare she not be submissive? How dare she dream to be more than a servant? The thing about these caricatures is none of them are true. They're just ploys used by a dominant society to try to subdue the survival and adaptations to survive. The third controlling image was that of the welfare mother. The welfare mother was she represented a completely different ideology of the matriarch. She was still sexually, quote unquote, masculine and curious and assertive and just a bold character. But this exploit was to excuse the restriction of resources for black mothers. Around this time, this was the most representation that black people ever had in society. They had more of a right to vote, to participate within legislation, or at least with the voting of legislation, and they were finally included with social welfare systems. So what the white elite system did was they used the fertility and the breedability of black women, particularly this welfare mother, as an excuse to not assist them economically. The perception of black female fertility has been at play since American slavery. There was always this perception that the black woman was more fertile. She was more sexually aggressive and more sexually deviant, that she was animalistic and wanted to have children. But in the eyes of the white slave master, this was this was essential for the capitalistic nature of slavery. The more children the woman has, the more money that I make. The more daughters that she has, the more potential for there to be sons. That the creation of a labor market and capitalistic curiosity stems from this. And in the eyes of the white supremacist, the black mother would use the welfare system, or she would use her fertility and her animalistic nature as a way to exploit the social welfare system. That brings us to our next controlling image, that being that of the black welfare queen. She still was going to exploit the social welfare system, but she had a more devious, manipulative way and arrogant way of going about this. She wasn't going to take advantage of her fertility and her femininity to get resources. She was just going to exploit the system by any means necessary. She was arrogant, she was selfish and capitalistic. She still had the sexual deviancy of the mother as well as the matriarch, but she was essentially a mooch. This image justified not supporting expensive welfare programs that would have helped poor families. During the Reagan administration in the 80s, this image was used to justify cuts on government social welfare systems. She was materialistic, domineering, and was perfectly content with being alone, being independent, not marrying a man, and being married to the state, which was ideologically this opposed everything that the white patriarchal male elite stood for. So this image was to justify restricting her need for these things. Next, we have the black lady. The black lady is honestly the most down to earth and the most graceful of the controlling images. I would say that the welfare queen is the worst, being as though because she holds a lot of the qualities of all of the negative qualities of all of the controlling images outside of the mammy. But the black lady will convince you that this was a successful controlling image, but being as though she was idealized as being this hardworking, financially stable, still masculine woman. She made enemies out of her men as well as white men. White males used reverse racism as well as criticism of affirmative action as a way to justify not giving her the opportunity to build resources, to network, and to grow within corporate America. She was a threat to jobs, and elite people questioned her work ethic and if she was even supposed to be here in the first place. She was only a product of affirmative action. She didn't deserve to actually be here. And you see this all the time in this day. You see this all the time. There are white doctors who criticize black women in the same positions of them and justify their criticism of them due to affirmative action. These women didn't have to work harder in a society where no one trusts them. They were granted opportunities because A, they're women, A, they're feminine and sexual, but they also have affirmative action on their side. And so even though this particular image can be seen as decent, it still justifies a white patriarchal system as well as a black patriarchal system. It justifies competition as well as not working with her, but working against her, because she still is the antithesis of what a woman is supposed to be. A woman is not supposed to be more powerful, more ambitious, and more curious than a man. Our final controlling image is that of the Jezebel. This is the image that I believe is seen most often today. She is the sexually deviant woman. She is the whore. Her thirst for sex is insatiable, and she is willing to do anything and everything for it. She's even willing to use her body and her sexuality as a means to create income for herself. The black woman, since American slavery, has been perceived as more sexually curious and aggressive than the passive sexual nature of the white male, which could not be farther from the truth. This controlling image was used to rape, disrespect, and sexually assault black women, to demean them. And the sad part about this is you see this controlling image all over the place, whether it's TikTok, whether it's pornography, whether it's films, whether it is YouTube and rap music. The people who are affected the most by this particular image, whether for better or worse, whether for a fuck you to the system or genuinely believing that black women are this way, have absorbed this particular image of the Jezebel. The black woman does not deserve love. She does not deserve respect, and she does not deserve loyalty because she is no more than a sexual beast, an animal of sorts. She is not meant to be protected the same way as the passive white woman, at least in the eyes of white supremacy. So even though all of these controlling images are polarizing and completely different, they all do have intersectionalities that play into controlling femininity. The idea that the woman cannot survive on her own, the woman that if the idea that if a woman shares a man's sexual appetite or aggressiveness, that is taboo within a white patriarchal capitalistic society. And not only were these images used to control the perceptions of black females by black women themselves, white men and white women, the idea that these women could be surviving and not be catering to a man cannot stand within a white elite society. So again, these images were used as a way to control and excuse the abuse and the neglect of the black woman. It's so crazy just because I see stuff like this all the time. I hear talk even in athletes. There have been whole groups on Twitter that have justified only, or NFL, NBA pros who have only justified talking to white women because black women were loud and aggressive. There's this perception that black women are loud and aggressive. And a lot of times this isn't true, but a lot of these things trace back to these controlling images that were used 170 years ago. And the black woman has never gotten the benefit of the doubt. She is not a cog within the system, but she is the rust in the machine. She is the reason why the machine operates the way that it does. So this has been my podcast, and thank you.